Alright guys, I'm going to shortly explain how input does not necessarily need to be comprehensible. A lot of people think that according to Stephen Krashen's theory, we acquire languages when we understand messages. And this is true, right? This is a fundamental truth that I've confirmed through learning, teaching myself all these languages. But the premise that you need to have your comprehension at 95% in order for you to acquire languages is completely false. Because you don't need to be watching content that you understand 95%. Because you could be watching content that you only understand very little, like basically adult content, at 30%. You can still acquire new language. You can still acquire languages and understand easy messages from a very hard TV show or content. So I think when a lot of people, when they take Stephen Krashen's advice with comprehensible input, it's like, it doesn't need to be completely comprehensible, because even if there's a lot of things you don't understand, as long as you're immersing in the content, then that's enough. Because if you only understand 30% of an adult content, right? Let's say you only understand 30%. What you can do is you can go from 30% to 31%, because what matters is that there's I+1. As long as there's I+1 sentences, which means that there's sentences that are basically just one plus above your level, that's when you can acquire it. That's when you can acquire a new language. And the goal of language learning is to find as many I+1 sentences as possible. Basically, find as many sentences where you're able to understand just a little bit for you to acquire a new grammar pattern or a new vocabulary, right? So basically what it means is you understand everything about the sentence except for one word. But because this one word was used in the context of a TV show, you're able to understand that one unknown word within everything else. And that's what made you acquire the language. That's how you acquire languages, is when you're able to understand messages in context that you previously were not able to understand by itself. So if you were to be given this sentence by itself with no context, you wouldn't understand it. There would be one word you wouldn't know. But because this word was used in the context of a TV show and you understood it fully, that is when your subconscious brain acquired that word. So it doesn't matter if you're going from 95% comprehension to 96% comprehension with a super easy TV show or like some baby content. Because when you're learning a language, like, you want to watch content that's fun. You don't want to watch content that's boring. Even if you understand like 95% of the content, if it's boring, like a kid's show, like a baby show where like it's like baby language, like there's no point in immersing yourself in that, in the beginning. Like, you can go straight to the deep end. You can watch content designed for native speakers, okay? And that will be enough. Because remember, as long as you're increasing your cutting edge of the language by consuming I+1 sentences, that's all that matters. And even if you watch an anime or a TV show where you're only able to understand like 90%, like 30% of the language, there's still a lot of words and a lot of sentences and a lot of grammar patterns that you can still acquire, that you can still learn from, even though your understanding is very low. But as long as you're having fun with the TV show, even if it's hard, you're having fun and you're engaging with it, that's enough. You don't necessarily need to have that TV show and calculate it to be exactly 95% comprehension for it to be, good. Now, of course, ideally, you'd want to immerse in content that you understand 95%, right? But when you're starting out in a language, this is not the case. You can't really do that. You can't really just find 95%, you can't really find content that you can understand at 95%, especially if you're just starting out, if you're like a beginner. Like, you're not going to be able to, like, anything you touch that's designed for native speakers to consume, even if it's for kids, you're only going to understand like a little bit of it. You're not going to understand nearly close to 95%. Okay, maybe 95% will only get there. You only get there once you're close to fluency. But once you're already close to fluency, then you can start to take that philosophy of finding content that you understand 95%. Then you can take Stephen Krashen's advice, right? When it comes to consuming content that's just above your level. Like, just above your level, as in like you understand literally 95%. You understand pretty much everything. And there's like an extra 5% you don't understand. Like, now you can take that seriously. But when you're in the beginning stages of language, you can't really do that. You don't have that luxury because you don't understand enough yet. So all you should be focused about is just increasing your comprehension. And you can do that immersing in more difficult content that you don't understand much of, okay? So You guys don't have to worry about immersing in content that you have to understand a lot, because the reality is, even if you don't understand a lot of it, you can still progress in your language very, very fast and very, very, as long as you keep immersing, your brain will figure it out. And that's what you guys have to put in. You guys have to trust that your brain will figure it out, okay? Because I know it sounds weird, because when I was immersing in French in the beginning, I was like, there's no way my brain's gonna figure this out. I was like a bunch of blur, a bunch of noise. And then over time, like suddenly I started to be able to understand a little bit more. And I was like, I understood this word. I understood that phrase. I was able to catch on to what that. I was able to understand what the person was saying. And slowly over time, you understand more and more and more. So yeah, guys, don't try to immerse only in content for babies in an attempt to try to make the input comprehensible. Because the reality is, what matters is that you're consuming I+1 sentences that are just above your level. And you can find those sentences within TV shows that are very hard. So don't limit yourself to that.